Hello everyone and welcome back to Meerkat's Guide to SMITE. Today we're going to be talking about two things. First off, we're going to be talking about leveling up the god's abilities, and then we're going to talk about itemization and building items on gods, the things you need to look for, and the kind of items you're going to want to build on specific types of gods. But first, let's get started with the abilities. I'm using Apollo as my example today. If you remember from the last part, each god has 4 abilities. Every time you level up, you can put a point to rank up one of your abilities up to their rank 5. However, your ultimate can only be ranked up at a few specific levels. Your ultimate ability cannot be gotten before level 5. You cannot put a second point into it until level 9. A third point can go into it at level 13, fourth point at level 17, and then your fifth and final point cannot go into your ultimate until you reach the max level of 20. So when you're leveling God's abilities, there's going to be one ability that you're going to want to max out first. In Apollo's case, it's his first ability, So Beautiful. So when you start the game at level 1, you're going to get So Beautiful. Then at level 2, you're going to get either his second or his third ability. This could be very situational. Could also have something to do with what game mode you're playing. But for this guide, let's just go ahead and take Serenade, his second ability, at level 2. And then at level 3, you have a choice between adding a second point to the ability you want to max out first, or getting your third ability. Personally, I like to go ahead and get my third ability at level 3 to make sure I have my whole kit to work with, and then put a second point into So Beautiful at level 4. Then at level 5, you're going to go ahead and grab your ultimate and put your first point in it. Then you're going to go back to that ability you want to max out first. So at level 6, you will put another point into So Beautiful, followed by another point at level 7. Now, with the way the leveling system works, you cannot max out an ability unless one of your other abilities has at least 2 points in it. So what you want to do is at level 8, don't level any abilities. Wait for level 9, then go ahead and grab the second point in your ultimate and the final point of the ability you want to max first, So Beautiful in this case, both at level 9. Starting at level 10, then you want to focus on the ability you want to max out second. For Apollo, personally, I like to go ahead and max out Serenade second. So you're going to put a point into Serenade at level 10, level 11, and level 12. Then you're going to go ahead and put your third point in your ultimate at level 13. At level 14, you will go ahead and max out the second ability you want to have maxed. Then at level 15, you go to the third ability you want to have maxed out. In this case, the moves. So you put your second point into your 3 at level 15. Then a third point at level 16, and then at level 17, go ahead and put the fourth point in your ultimate before adding points into your 3 at level 18 and 19 before finishing off your ultimate at level 20. This is the generic formula for all gods. However, there are some gods that don't necessarily fit this bill. There are some gods where you don't necessarily always want to get your ultimate the first level it's available. And also keep in mind that the order that you want to max them out is not always going to be max out your first ability first, then your second ability, then your third ability. It's going to be different for gods. But this is just the general format that you're going to use most of the time in the game of SMITE. So now that we've talked about the abilities, let's move over and talk about items. First, let's go ahead and narrow this down a little bit, and we're going to take a look at warriors. Because warriors are the most tricky to build, so we're going to go ahead and start with them and kind of work our way to easier classes, the mages and the hunters. When you're building a warrior, you are looking for a good hybrid of offense and defense. So you're going to want to build both power and protections, or attack speed and protections, depending on if you're playing more ability-based warrior like a Chalk or Hercules, or if you're playing a more auto-attack based warrior like Osiris. So let's go ahead and take a look at Chalk. If you remember back to the first video, I pointed out that all damaging abilities have a percentage of physical power that is converted into extra damage for that ability. Well, where does that physical power come from? Well, some of it comes naturally from a god. As he levels up, he gains some physical power. But most of it comes from items. So when you see gods that have high scaling, Chalk doesn't have super high scaling, but pretty decent scaling on his Thunderstrike at 60%. Good scaling on his Torrent at 70%. Rain Dance is a heal, and his physical power also adds extra heal. So there's a little bit of physical power added to the heal every time it ticks. And then a full 100% of his physical power is added to damage for his Storm Call. So Chalk is a very ability-based style warrior, and therefore you're going to want to build a lot of physical power on him. So these are some of the items I like to build on Chalk. Like we said, he does have some pretty good scaling, so you're going to want to build him with physical power, as well as protections to make him tanky, as well as do damage, which is what you want warriors to do. Be a decent hybrid of both damage and protections. So items like Warrior Tabi, they give physical power. Jotun's Wrath, which gives physical power. Then you have a Mystical Mail, which gives protection and health. A Spirit Robe, both physical and magical protection, and a little bit of cooldown reduction. Magi's Blessing with protections and health. A Stone of Gaia with magical protection. Frostbound Hammer with physical power. A Rune-Forged Hammer that gives physical protection and health, but its passive converts 15% of those physical protections into more physical power. When we talk about protections mitigate damage. They make your opponent's attacks do less damage than they're supposed to do. Generally speaking, across all gods in Smite, you want to keep your protections right around 100 for the most part, because 100 protections will mitigate 50% of damage. That being said, people will build penetration to counter protections. What penetration does is it cuts through the protections. So for example, Jotun's Wrath gives 11 physical penetration. So that's going to negate 11 protections. So when your enemy starts building a lot of penetration, then you know you're going to have to build even more protection if you want to continue to mitigate the same amount of damage. If you continue to only have the same amount of protections as your opponent builds penetration, then they are going to continue to do more damage to you. So keep that in mind, and remember to keep pressing tab in game to see what your opponent's building so you can countermatch them. There are also auto-attack based hunters like Osiris. Osiris has lower scaling on his abilities, with the exception of his ultimate, which does have high scaling. But generally, you're going to get most of your damage out of Osiris from his basic attacks. And when we're talking basic attacks, you want to build items that give you things like attack speed, such as Ninja Tabi, which give you a little bit of physical power, some attack speed, and some movement speed. Other attack speed items such as Hasten Fatalis, which you will see sometimes, Witch Blade, which gives some physical protection as well, Wing Blade, Executioner and Aussie are really popular. And of course, Odysseus Bow and Ichabod are your good attack speed items. Other things you need to look at when you're building an auto attack based warrior is crit. So your Deathbringer, your Rage, your Malice, and your Golden Bow. You don't see Golden Bow a whole lot nowadays. Mostly you're going to see these three, and mostly Rage and Deathbringer. Rage is going to give you a whole bunch of critical chance, which is going to increase your chance of getting a critical hit, which that does additional damage, mostly from its passive, where if your basic attack does not critically strike, your critical strike chance increases by an additional 10% on top of the 30 it already has, up to 5 times, and it resets on a successful crit. Deathbringer is going to give you the critical power that is going to allow your crits to hit harder and do more damage because of its passive, where it gives you a little bit of critical strike chance and physical power, but its passive is the big thing where it increases your critical strike damage by 50%. And then, of course, because they're a warrior, you want to mix them with protections, both physical and magical, to keep your god balanced and protected from the enemy. Now let's move on to Guardians. If you remember, Guardians are high defense, and mostly you're going to see Guardians play a support role, where they're going to absorb the damage for their teammates, so that way they can deal out the damage to kill the enemy gods. So when you're looking at a Guardian, the two major items you're going to look at are Heartward Amulet, which gives you 300 health, 60 magical protection, but also gives it a aura to all allies within 70 units. So all allies within 70 units gain 20 extra physical protection and 20 mana per 5 seconds. And its sister item, Sovereignty, which is the same, only on the physical protection end. It gives 100 less health than Heartward Amulet, but 55 physical protections. All allies within 70 units gain 20 magical protection, 25 health per 5 seconds, as opposed to the mana per 5 seconds. So these two aura items are the core of any Guardian build when they're playing a support role. So Sovereignty gives the physical protection with the magical aura, and Heartward Amulet gives the magical protection with the physical aura. So you're going to want to build your Guardians to have high defense to mitigate damage. You're going to want to build them with auras to help their teammates, and you're going to want to build them with utility. So utility is things like cooldown reductions. So an item like a Witchblade, for example. 300 health, which is really nice for a Guardian. You get 10% cooldown reduction, so your cooldowns on your abilities are shorter, so you can cast more of them to continue to help your team. And then it gives you a little bit of attack speed and a little bit of movement speed as well. Also, you can get the Shoes of Focus, which give you a little bit of magical power, but the all-important 15% cooldown reduction and the 18% movement speed. So that's what you're really looking for when you're building a Guardian in a support role. You're looking to build defense and utility, so that way you can help out your team. Assassins, if you remember, are going to deal out high damage. However, sort of like warriors, you do want to build your assassins with some defense. So let's bring up Thor. Thor, you're generally going to see him pick up the Warrior Tabi for the extra physical power, because he is a more ability-oriented assassin as opposed to an auto-attack based assassin. And another one of his core items is Jotun's Wrath, a lot like Chalk. But on most assassins, you're going to want to get a Magi's Blessing, because Magi's Blessing gives 15 physical protection, 15 magical protection. That's not a whole lot, but it does give you a nice bit of health. But its passive is why Magi's Blessing is such a good item in Smite. It absorbs a single hard crowd control effect or a root, which is classified as a soft crowd control effect. And this can happen once every 60 seconds. And when it happens, you also get 1 second of crowd control immunity. And because if you remember, assassins at the base have lower defense, if they get stunned out or rooted, they're going to be pretty easy to bring down. So Magi's Blessing is core on most assassins. But remember, you're also going to want to build them some defense. But you don't necessarily want to always sacrifice power for defense. So there are some good hybrid items that work well with assassins, like the Shifter Shield, which gives protections and physical power, as well as its passive, where you're over 50% health, you gain an additional 20 physical power, but while you're under 50% health, you get 20 physical and 20 magical protections on top. Or the Void Shield is another nice hybrid item. You get 50 physical protection, 25 physical power, and you also can reduce the physical protections of enemies within 55 units of you for 1 second in an aura. Witchblade is another more hybrid item, but you're going to see it more on auto-attack base assassins, such as Kali, or a Loki, or a Bakasura. You're more likely to see the Witchblade on them because it gives the attack speed, which is an item that they want as auto-attack based assassins as opposed to ability-based assassins. So that's really what you're looking for when you're building assassins. You want to build them with high physical power or high attack speed and crit, depending on if they're auto attack or basic attack oriented. And then also build them with a Magi's Blessing for the CC immunity, and then build some defense on them to help keep them from dying too quickly. One thing I want to point out, Bastet. She has 100% physical scaling on her Pounce, on her Declaw. So those are 2 of her 3 abilities that are at 100% physical power. Her Declaw is at 25% of her physical power per tick, and it ticks 4 times. So that in itself is another 100% of physical power ability. And then 20% of her physical power on her Cat Call, which is where she summons 3 cats that continue to attack the enemy. And you get 20 physical power every time they attack. So that just keeps adding up and adding up and adding up. So Bastet is super reliant on getting a lot of physical power. So Bastet is the kind of god you really want to look at building the items Heartseeker or Transcendence. These 2 items are 2 of the strongest physical power items in the game. As you can see, Heartseeker is significantly cheaper, and its passive is Y. Heartseeker at the base gives you 30 physical power and 8% movement speed. That doesn't seem like a lot, but look at its passive. You get 1 physical power per stack, and you get 2 stacks for a god kill, 1 stack for a minion kill, and the max is 50 stacks, so this item fully stacked gives you an additional 50 physical power. However, the reason why it's significantly cheaper than the Transcendence is because the stacks are also halved on death. So every time you die, you lose half of your Heartseeker stacks, so you need to restack it. But it doesn't take a whole lot of time to restack necessarily, because you only need 50 stacks, and you do get 1 stack per minion kill, so that's only 50 minions. So that's not a whole lot to stack a Heartseeker back up. Transcendence is a lot more expensive. It gives 35 physical power at the base, 300 mana, which makes it huge on these gods that are using their abilities a lot. They need this physical power because they get all this extra mana to do it with, and they also get +6 mana per 5 seconds, so their mana regeneration is even increased. Plus, it's passive. It's a stacking item like Heartseeker, but you get 15 mana per stack, so you get even more mana to use your abilities. You get 5 stacks every time you kill a god, 1 stack for a minion kill, max 50 stacks. Here's the kicker: 3% of your total mana is converted to physical power from Transcendence. Transcendence is the highest physical power item in the game. And unlike Heartseeker, you keep the stacks. When you die, you don't lose your stacks. So once you have the max 50 stacks on Transcendence, you keep them. And you just continue to deal out large amounts of damage. So when you see gods with huge scaling on their abilities, look at Heartseeker and Transcendence. Now we're going to move on to mages. Most mages, with the exception of Ao Kuang, Freya, Kronos, and Zeus to some extent, you're building them to maximize their abilities, not their basic attacks. So you want to build them with a lot of magical power. So let's look at Agni. Agni, his Noxious Fumes. The scaling looks small on his Noxious Fumes, but Noxious Fumes ticks damage every second for 10 seconds. So that's 10 ticks of 5%. So that makes that scaling 50% for anything that's in the Noxious Fumes for all 10 seconds. So that's a little higher. 50% of the magic protection on the flame layer, pretty decent. 15 per tick on the Path of Flames, and it's every 0.5 seconds that it ticks, so for 3 seconds, and then the 60% of the magical power per Agni Bomb. So he doesn't have huge scaling, but with a mage, you want to build large amounts of physical power to make up for not having the huge scaling numbers, so your abilities can still do huge damage. So when you're looking to a mage, you're looking at items such as Shoes of the Magi, which gives 65 magical power, 250 mana, 18% movement speed, of course. You're looking at Kronos Pendant, which gives you not a ton of magical power at 75, but it gives you 25 MP5 to give you more mana to use your abilities, and 25% cooldown reduction so you can use your abilities more often. Soul Reaver, 100 magical power, 300 mana, and it's huge passive. When a god takes damage from your abilities, they take 15% of their maximum health in addition to their damage. If multiple gods are hit with the same ability, the damage is applied to the one with the greatest maximum health, and it can only occur once every 60 seconds. A lot of times you're not going to build any defense on your mages. You're going to build them power and cooldown reduction. That's what you're building in your mages, with the exception of a few, such as Ao Kuang, because Ao Kuang is an auto attack based character. he's looking for most of his damage from his auto attacks as opposed to his abilities. So when you look at Ao Kuang, you want to look at items like Telkine's Ring, 45 magical power, 30 magical protection, 10% attack speed, plus the passive of your basic attacks, dealing 40 additional magical damage, and Demonic Grip that gives you 60 magical power and 25% attack speed, and your basic attacks, reducing your target's magical protection by 7% and an additional 5 points for 3 seconds for a maximum of 3 stacks. You are still going to want to build power so you can do damage with your abilities. Lifesteal is important on all mages, as you gain health back for damage you deal. So you're going to build lifesteal a decent bit of the time on mages. You don't have to build it all the time, but it's a really good item to build, especially on these auto attack characters, because magical lifesteal affects both the abilities and the auto attacks. Physical lifesteal, that we'll get to in a moment when we talk about hunters, affects only basic attacks. Again, Ao Kuang is a auto attack based mate, and he's also melee. You're going to want to build defense on him. So a Hide of the Urchin, Magi's Blessing, even a hybrid item like a Witchblade that gives more attack speed are good ideas. Also, what you can look at of mages, if you're not going to build your burst mages full power, so, you know, Agni, Giannis, Kukulkan, Poseidon, is build some utility on them like you build with Guardians, and build items like Gem of Isolation that apply slows to your enemies, and other items like that that can help set up your teammates as opposed to necessarily dealing all the damage yourself as the mage. And finally, we move on to hunters. There are really only 2 ways to build a hunter right now. The slightly older build is right now taking a backseat to the newer build, but let's go ahead and take a look at them both. The older build, you would get your starting item, Bluestone Pendant. Then you would get Devourer's Gauntlet, which is that physical lifesteal. With Devourer's Gauntlet, you get 25 physical power and 10% lifesteal, so you're taking damage you dealt and regenerating your health with it, and you permanently gain 0.4 physical power and 0.20% physical lifesteal per stack. You get 5 stacks for a god kill, 1 stack for a minion kill. So that gives you a decent bit of physical power and a good bit of lifesteal. As you can see, it's the 10%, but that's not counting if it was stacked. Then after Devourer's Gauntlet, you would get either Ninja Tabi or Warrior Tabi. At the end game of the with this build, the damage per second numbers come out so similar between the 2 boots. It's really a personal preference. The Warrior Tabi, your abilities are going to hit a little harder. Attack speed, you're going to get a little more attack speed out of them. I personally like to go with the Ninja Tabi. After the Ninja Tabi, you would go into the item Ikavol. It's a cheap tier 2 item, 1700 gold, 30% attack speed, and 10 physical penetration. And every successful basic attack increases your physical power by 10 and reduces your target's physical power from items by 10. And this occurs for 3 seconds and can occur up to 3 times at a time. So you would get yourself an Ikavol. It's a nice early to mid-game item to give you a nice power spike. And then you would go into the Executioner. Another attack speed and physical power item. 30 physical power, 25% attack speed, and your basic attacks against an enemy reduces their physical protection by 6 and an additional 8% for 3 seconds for a max of 3 stacks per target. After your Executioner, you would then go into your crit. You would get Rage, as we talked about earlier, for your critical strike chance. Then you would get the Deathbringer. And then you would sell your Bluestone Pendant late game, because at this point you have enough base mana to sustain your abilities. And if the god you were playing had an attack speed steroid, such as Artemis, Rom, or Apollo, you would usually get Titan's Bane for extra penetration. It's over here. Or if it was a god that did not have an attack speed steroid, like on her, you would get the Odysseus Bow, which gives you 40% attack speed, and every 4th basic attack triggers Chain Lightning, damaging targets and up to 4 nearby enemies for 30 damage and 50% of your total physical power. So that was the slightly older Hunter build for Season 2 of Smite. But recently, a new build has come on. And in this build, you start with Bluestone Pendant. And then you would build into the Heartseeker we talked about earlier. Then you would build, at this point in the game, Heartseeker is cheaper than a Devourer's Gauntlet. So you're going to get it online quicker. And the idea is that you're going to be doing more damage to him in the early game. However, you don't have the sustain from the extra life steal from the Devourer's Gauntlet that you do from the Heartseeker. So then, to give yourself the life steal, you go ahead and pick up Aussie. It's a tier 2 item, 1780 gold, pretty cheap, 15% physical life steal, 30% attack speed, 15 physical penetration, and it's passive. If you drop below 35% health, you get an additional 25% lifesteal for 5 seconds, and this effect can only occur once every 15, so you get the Aussie to give yourself a bunch of attack speed, some physical lifesteal, and then you would go ahead and get your boots. Either boots. Like I said, I like to go to the Ninja Tabi. Then you would go into your Ichabile. Into your Executioner. And then at this point, you would sell your Bluestone Pendant for your Rage. And then sell your Ichabile for your Deathbringer. And that's your new Heartseeker build for Hunters. And there was one other build that was used. It was pretty much a variation of the original build with the Devourer's Gauntlet, into the boots, to the Ichabile, then the Executioner, the Rage, Deathbringer. So at this point, you're at your full 6 items. Instead of selling your Ichabile for the Titan's Bane or the Odysseus Bow, you would sell it for Malice and go the triple crit build. Malice is an item, 50 physical per hour, 20 critical strike chance, and it's passive. When you deal a critical strike, you get an additional 75% of your total physical power as physical damage over the next 3 seconds, so it's a damage over time. And additional crits will continue to refresh this effect, so it'll continue to apply more dots to your enemy. So now we've talked about the base items, let's talk about the last 2 types of items real quick. The actives, and the consumables. Actives. You can hold 2 actives. Once you buy an active and leave the base with it, you cannot sell it back. You are stuck with it. There's Sprint. This is going to make you go fast. Heavenly Agility is going to make you and your teammates go fast. Achilles Spear. You're going to gain attack speed, lifesteal, movement speed. You're going to do additional damage, but you're also going to take additional damage from the enemy. Aegis Amulet. It's going to make you invulnerable for a short time. Creeping Curse. You're going to lower your target's movement speed and attack speed, and the Weakening Curse actually reduces their healing by 100%. Meditation, which you're only ever going to use in Assault. You get Salvation. Heal your enemies and your teammates. Shield of the Underworld is going to reflect 40% of all damage you take back to its owner as magical damage, and they cannot lifesteal on you. Purification Beads. It's going to remove crowd control from you and give you a short crowd control immunity after its use. Girdle. Physical and magical power buff. For your allies, Blink. It's going to allow you to teleport a short distance. Can't be used when it's in combat unless you get the combat Blink. Hand of the Gods. It's going to do damage to jungle camps and creeps. Also, pets and minions that gods can lay down. Maximum of 3 enemy minions or jungle monsters can be hit by it. When you get to, if you take Wrath of the Gods, when you get the Fire Giant or Gold Fury down to 25%, hit it with Wrath of the Gods, it will kill it automatically. Fist of the Gods. 3 minions or jungle monsters does damage to. Plus, if you hit an enemy god with it, it'll stun them for a second. Teleport. Allow you to teleport to gods, or wards, or towers. Eye of the Providence, which is pretty much never used anymore. Let you place free wards. Shell. Protections buff for you and your team. Those are the actives you can get. And finally, the consumables. These you buy. You have 2 slots for them. Once you use them, they're used up. Can't use them again. You have a health potion. Gives you back health. Mana potion gives you back mana. The multi potion gives you some health back and some mana back. Ward. Very important item in the game of Smite. You can only hold 2 of these at a time. You put it down, and anytime an enemy walks over it, it'll ping, and you can see that they're there. Gives you vision over that part of the map, because you can only see enemies on your minimap in Smite if they are in the line of vision of a friendly god, or one of your towers, phoenixes, or any of your minions. Sentry wards do the same thing as wards. You can only hold 1 of them at a time, but also, if you place it down, any enemy wards that are within the area of the sentry ward will be unveiled to you, so you can see them, and so you can destroy them. For physical gods, you get the Potion of Physical Might. The red pot gives you extra physical power. For magical gods, it's the purple pot, Potion of Magical Might. Elixir of Power gives you increased magical and physical power. And the Elixir of Defense gives you extra protections. So those are the items. So now you know a little bit more how to build your gods, what kind of things you need to look for when you're building a god, whether it's a auto attack based god or an ability based god. And so that will conclude this guide. Stay tuned, because next up will be the Conquest guide, where I will go all over the game of Conquest, the different positions. I will break it down into multiple guides to make it easier to watch, easier to follow, and easier on my internet to upload. So thank you for watching my itemization and leveling guide. I hope you enjoyed. Leave a like if you did. Subscribe so you can check out all of my other content. And I will see you in the next episode.